In the 1880s, a man from a small coastal town in southern Sweden packed up everything he owned and boarded a ship bound for America. His name was Carl Jeppson, and he came from Ystad, a quiet place in the Skåne region where wormwood grew wild in the fields and farmers distilled it into a brutally bitter spirit called beskbrännvin. It was the kind of drink that stripped the paint off your Thursday and somehow made Friday feel earned. Jeppson carried that recipe with him when he landed in Chicago and settled on the city's north side, near the intersection of Clybourne Avenue and Division Street, right in the heart of a growing Swedish immigrant community. For a while, Jeppson ran a cigar shop. He was just another face in the patchwork of immigrant neighborhoods that made up turn-of-the-century Chicago. But he never stopped making his wormwood liquor. He brewed it the way his people had done for centuries, with that same tongue-peeling bitterness that Scandinavians somehow considered normal. And when the United States government decided in 1920 that nobody should be allowed to drink anymore, Carl Jeppson saw an opportunity where most people saw a dead end. See, the Volstead Act that enforced prohibition did have a loophole. You could still sell alcohol if it was classified as medicine. Doctors could write prescriptions for whiskey. Pharmacies could dispense medicinal spirits. And Carl Jeppson, he grabbed a suitcase, filled it with bottles of his wormwood concoction, and started going bar to bar, door to door, through the Swedish neighborhoods along Clark Street in Andersonville. He told anyone who would listen that his liquor cured stomach worms and parasites. The thing is, federal agents did come sniffing around. Prohibition enforcement officers were constantly hunting for people selling bootleg alcohol disguised as medicine. They showed up. They questioned Jeppson, and then, according to the legend that has followed this drink for 100 years, they actually tasted it. The agents took one sip of Jeppson's wormwood spirit and arrived at a conclusion that would accidentally save the entire brand. They decided that there was absolutely no way any human being would voluntarily drink this for pleasure. It had to be medicine. Nobody would choose this, so they let him keep selling it. Carl Jeppson, the Swedish immigrant with the suitcase full of wormwood liquor, had just accidentally created the perfect prohibition-proof business model. His product was so genuinely unpleasant that it served as its own alibi. But Jeppson wasn't just lucky. He was also, according to people who knew him, a lifelong smoker whose taste buds had been so thoroughly destroyed by decades of cigars that he actually enjoyed the flavor. The bitterness that made federal agents recoil was, to Jeppson, perfectly drinkable. Maybe even refreshing. He was quite literally the only person on Earth who thought this stuff tasted fine. When Prohibition finally ended in 1933, most medicinal alcohol brands disappeared overnight. Their entire reason for existing had been the loophole, and now the loophole was closed. But Jeppson's Malört, named after the Swedish word for wormwood, stuck around. After Repeal, Jeppson was able to sell his recipe to a proper distillery, and that is where the second most unlikely character in this story enters. George Brode was a young Chicago attorney who worked as vice president of Beelzoff Products Company, a local distillery. Brode had a side gig purchasing liquor recipes from immigrants around the city, and sometime around 1934, he bought Jeppson's formula. Now, here is the thing about George Brode. He personally found Malört absolutely disgusting. He thought it was one of the most unpleasant things he had ever tasted. But Brode was a businessman, and he recognized that there were people out there, particularly blue-collar workers and shift workers in Chicago's immigrant communities, who actually wanted this stuff. So Brode did something clever. He kept the name Jeppson's Malört, designed an iconic label featuring a crest with 3 stars that mirrored the 3 stars on the Chicago flag, and started marketing. He pushed the spirit beyond its Swedish origins and introduced it to Chicago's large Polish community, who had their own tradition of drinking piołunówka, a similar wormwood cordial. The Polish community embraced it, and from there, Malört slowly spread to the rest of the city. Brode eventually bought out the entire Beelzoff company, sold off every other brand, renamed the whole operation the Carl Jeppson Company after Jeppson died in 1949, and dedicated the next 4 decades of his life to one singular obsession: marketing Jeppson's Malört. Just that. One product, one flavor, one mission, for 40 years. And Brode leaned into exactly what made Malört special. He wrote a testimonial for the back of every bottle that might be the most honest piece of advertising in American history. Instead of pretending the liquor tasted good, the label essentially warned you. It told first-time drinkers that most people reject the flavor, that the taste is rugged, unrelenting, and even brutal to the palate, and then it dared you to try a second shot anyway. That self-awareness became the entire identity of the brand. While every other liquor company in America was trying to convince you their product was smooth, refreshing, and delicious, Malört was standing in the corner of the bar saying, "Yeah, this is going to hurt, and you are going to drink it anyway." By the 1950s, Malört had a steady home at the Medicinal distillery in Chicago, where production and bottling ran from 1953 onward. During this era, you could buy Jeppson's Malört in a glass bottle with an actual stem of wormwood floating inside it. Think of it like the worm in a bottle of mezcal, except the wormwood stem wasn't doing anything for the flavor. The flavor was already doing plenty. Malört hit its commercial peak in 1973, when Brode sold almost 4,000 cases. That might sound modest compared to, say, Jack Daniel's, but for a single flavor wormwood liquor that most people compared to drinking gasoline, 4,000 cases was practically a miracle. But then, things started to slide. The Medicinal distillery, the last distillery left in Chicago that produced Malört, closed down in the mid-1970s. There was simply nowhere left in the city to make the stuff. Production moved briefly to Kentucky, and then, in the late 1980s, all the way down to Auburndale, Florida, near Tampa. Chicago's signature spirit was now being made over 1,000 miles away, in a state known for sunshine and margaritas, not wormwood bitters. And here is where the story could have ended. Sales were declining year after year. The brand had no marketing budget. The bottles sat on the back shelves of VFW halls and neighborhood dive bars where nobody under 50 ever looked. Bartenders used it as a punishment, a prank birthday shot for someone who asked for a free drink. It was the liquor equivalent of a dare, and fewer people were taking it. Then George Brode died in 1999. Brode left the entire Carl Jeppson company to his legal secretary and sole remaining employee, a woman named Patricia Gabelick. She had been hired by Brode back in 1966, and over 33 years, she had become not just his assistant, but his friend, his confidant, and apparently, the only person he trusted enough to inherit a wormwood empire. That year, the company sold roughly 1,600 cases. Gabelick ran the whole operation from her apartment on Lakeshore Drive. She had no staff, no computer, and she contracted distillation through a facility in Florida that she coordinated by phone and mail. For nearly a decade, Patricia Gabelick kept Malört alive through sheer stubbornness. Not because it was profitable, not because anyone was clamoring for it. She kept it alive because George Brode had kept it alive, and Carl Jeppson had kept it alive before him. And the idea of letting this weird, bitter, beautiful little liquor disappear from the world felt like a betrayal of something she couldn't quite name. But what happened next is the part of this story that nobody could have predicted. In the late 2000s, a bouncer at a Chicago wine bar named Sam Mechling was dared by a co-worker to try a shot of Malört. The co-worker told Mechling that it tasted like the junk drawer that everybody has in their kitchen. That description was so bizarre, so specific, so completely insane that Mechling had to try it. He did, and the co-worker was right. It was exactly as terrible as advertised. Most people would have moved on. Mechling did the opposite. He became obsessed. Not with the flavor itself, but with watching other people try it for the first time. He started bringing bottles of Malört to birthday parties and gatherings. He would hand someone a shot, say nothing, and then watch as their face contorted into what would soon become known across the internet as Malört face. That involuntary grimace, the puckered lips, the watering eyes, the look of someone who has just been deeply and personally betrayed by a liquid. Mechling started hosting Malört-themed trivia nights and comedy shows at bars around Chicago. He created Twitter and Facebook pages for the brand, which had no official social media presence at the time, and began documenting people's reactions alongside their one-line reviews. Those reviews became legendary. People wrote things like, "It tastes like the day Dad left." Others called it what soap washes its mouth with. One simply wrote, "Malört," because Blagojevich was not the worst thing that came out of Chicago. There was a problem, though. Mechling was spending his own money buying shots for people at events. To break even, he started selling T-shirts with the Malört logo out of Paddy Long's, a bar in the Lakeview neighborhood where he worked. One day, 100 people showed up just to buy Malört T-shirts. That caught Patricia Gabelick's attention. Around 2012, Gabelick showed up unannounced at Paddy Long's with her lawyer. Mechling thought he was about to get sued into oblivion for unauthorized use of the brand. The meeting was tense. Then Mechling showed Gabelick a letter he had sent her months earlier, declaring his love for Malört. He had included a check with profits from the T-shirt sales. The letter had been returned by the postal service. Gabelick had never even seen it. She decided she liked him. Instead of suing Sam Mechling, Patricia Gabelick hired him. From that point on, Mechling became Malört's first real marketing force in decades. His guerrilla campaigns, his comedy shows, his obsessive documentation of Malört face, all of it was now official. And the effect was dramatic. Malört went from being that weird bottle gathering dust on VFW hall shelves to being stocked in every hipster bar in Chicago. Sales jumped. The brand became a social media phenomenon. Something else started happening during this period too. Malört developed its own rituals. The most famous is the Chicago Handshake, a Boilermaker that pairs a shot of Malört with a can of old-style beer. You drink the shot, chase it with the beer, and if you are doing it right, you are in a dive bar on the north side, and it is 2 in the morning, and you are surrounded by people who understand you. The Chicago Handshake became a test of belonging. Not a test of toughness, exactly, but a test of willingness. Are you willing to participate in something that will make your face do things your face was not designed to do? Then welcome to Chicago. Bars started competing for Malört supremacy. In 2015, the Hi-Hat Club was voted the best Malört bar in Chicago and was awarded something called the Carl Cup, a perpetual trophy passed from winner to winner each year, like a bitter, wormwood-soaked version of the Stanley Cup. And the descriptions of the flavor just kept getting more creative. The comedian John Hodgman called it pencil shavings and heartbreak. In the 2013 film Drinking Buddies, Jason Sudeikis' character compared it to swallowing a burnt condom filled with gasoline. When Tremaine Atkinson, the man who would eventually buy the company, first tried Malört after moving to Chicago in 1998, he said it was like taking a bite out of a grapefruit and then drinking a shot of gasoline. Gasoline comes up a lot in Malört descriptions. That should tell you something. If you are finding this helpful, hit subscribe. We cover stories like this every week. Now, here is where the final act of this story brings everything full circle. By 2018, Patricia Gabelick was ready to retire. She had kept the Carl Jeppson company alive for nearly 20 years, running it from her apartment, keeping the faith. Tremaine Atkinson, the CEO and head distiller of CH Distillery in Chicago's Pilsen neighborhood, purchased the brand. And the first thing he did was bring production back to Chicago. For the first time in over 30 years, Malört was being made in the city it had always belonged to. Atkinson kept the original recipe almost entirely intact. The one change he made was removing an artificial coloring agent that had been added back in the 1970s. Today's Malört has its natural color, along with all the same ingredients that Carl Jeppson intended when he was hauling bottles out of a suitcase on Clark Street 100 years ago. The numbers tell the rest of the story. In 2007, bars across the country sold about 400,000 shots of Malört. By 2022, that number had climbed to 7.9 million. The brand expanded from being available in just 4 states to being sold in 30. People in New York, Los Angeles, and Portland started ordering Malört, partly out of curiosity, partly because Chicago expats refused to let go of their adopted city's drinking culture. Malört merchandise and tattoos featuring the three-star crest from the bottle became common sights in Chicago. The brand's self-deprecating humor, the tradition George Brode started back in the 1930s, had become the foundation of a genuine cultural identity. This was not a drink that people loved in spite of its reputation. They loved it because of its reputation. The awfulness was the point. The grimace was the ritual. The shared suffering was the bond. And that might be the most Chicago thing about all of it. This is a city that has always taken a particular pride in endurance, in surviving things, in looking at something brutal and cold and bitter and saying, yeah, okay, this is mine now. The winters are mine. The wind is mine. And this wormwood liquor that tastes like regret in a shot glass is mine, too. Carl Jeppson probably never imagined any of this. He was just a Swedish immigrant making the drink his people had always made, in a new city that was full of people just like him. People who had come from somewhere else, brought their traditions with them, and figured out how to keep those traditions alive, even when the world kept trying to shut them down. Prohibition could not kill Malört. Decades of declining sales could not kill it. Getting exiled to a factory in Florida could not kill it. A brand with no marketing budget, no staff, and no computer, run by a woman in her apartment on Lakeshore Drive, somehow refused to disappear. Today, ordering a shot of Malört for an unsuspecting friend remains one of Chicago's most sacred dive bar traditions. You do not warn them, you do not explain. You just slide the glass across the bar, watch their face, and welcome them to the club. The liquor that was once so bad it fooled the feds has become the taste of a city. And the look on your face when you drink it? That is your membership card. Anyway, that is the story. YouTube thinks you will like this video, so click it. And if you made it to the end, subscribe. We will see you in the next one.